Welcome back to the channel. The Sears catalog grew dog-eared by December. Every page marked in circles that meant want, need, or dream. Kids sprawled on the floor, arguing over which toys were realistic and which would never appear. The book felt like a promise, even when budget said otherwise. By the time Christmas morning came, the dog-eared pages had already written half the story in the 1960s. Motel lit up at dusk, their big neon vacancy signs blinking like beacons. Inside, the rooms offered ice buckets, Gideon Bibles, and bedspreads that often matched the pool chairs outside. Families pulled in with tired kids, grateful for the simple luxury of air conditioning and space to stretch out. The steady hum of the ice machine and the faint smell of chlorine set the mood. Sunday mornings, women wore white gloves and tilted hats, and men straightened their collars as pews filled with hymnals. Afterward, the church lawn became a picnic. Fried chicken, potato salad, and mason jars of sweet tea appeared from baskets. Laughter rising under shade trees. It wasn't fancy, but the whole town seemed to breathe together. Faith and fellowship woven into one easy rhythm, a jukebox. In the corner, stacked with 45s, was the heartbeat of every diner. Slip in a coin, press the clunky buttons, and watch the arms swing into place. The yellow plastic inserts rattled in your pocket, souvenirs of the last slow dance. When that song played your song, the whole room seemed to shift just for 3 minutes of borrowed magic. Playgrounds of the 60s were built of steel and concrete. Metal slides blistered hot under the summer sun. Tetherballs whipped with enough force to knock you flat, and merry-go-rounds spun until you staggered off dizzy. There was danger in every corner, but kids wore scrapes and bruises like medals. Somehow it was more fun when the rules felt looser. Christmas meant an aluminum tree gleaming under the glow of a rotating color wheel. 1 minute blue, then red, then green, as bubble lights burbled warm along the mantle. It was futuristic and tacky at once, but unforgettable. Families gathered in the glow, a new record spinning on the console. The seasons shimmering in shades no pine tree could ever match. Basement tables became airfields and racetracks with plastic. Model kits spread out like treasure. B-17 bombers, Mustangs, and hot rods rose from sprues with glue that stung the nose. Decals slid under fingertips, sticking imperfectly but proudly. Ours disappeared in that small world of paint and patience where imagination and craft built something solid enough to display. Door-to-door sales weren't just commerce. They were neighborhood events. Avon ladies knocked with lipstick samples. Stanley reps laid out cake pans. And gossip traveled faster than the catalogs. Neighbors gathered in kitchens. Coffee brewing, kids underfoot. The order forms filled slowly, but the laughter came quick. You didn't just buy things. You bought a little more connection with everyone on the block. A paper airline ticket felt like a passport to adventure. Printed in blue ink and tucked into a slim envelope. Sterts, always called that then, handed out shiny lapel pins shaped like wings. Kids clutched them like gold, slipping them into jewelry boxes at home. Flying wasn't routine. It was a privilege wrapped in ceremony and small treasures that lasted longer than the trip. Grocery shopping meant clerks punching steel keys on brass registers that clanged like typewriters. Price tags clung to every can, and bag boys carried sacks straight to the trunk with a smile. There was rhythm to it. The ringing of the till, the crinkle of paper, the chatter at the counter. Ice cream trucks wobbled down the street, playing Turkey in the Straw. Always a little off-key. Kids heard it before anyone else, scrambling for nickels and dimes. Desperate not to miss it, they ran barefoot across hot sidewalks, coins sweating at their palms. The driver's smile. The freezer doors clunk, and the first bite of a melting cone felt like rescue. Paper atlases lived in glove compartments, creased and stained from years of use. Dad would spread one across the hood, his thumb sliding along a red line toward a picnic spot nobody else knew. Kids traced rivers with fingertips, inventing names for towns. When you finally found the place, it felt like discovery, not directions, because the map was the adventure. Hardware stores smelled of oil, wood, An iron clerk scooped nails into brown paper sacks with bare hands, the clink ringing like coins. Rope was measured in arm lengths, cut clean with a solemn nod. The store was a place of trust. Credit often jotted on scraps of paper, advice free, and everything built to last longer than the person buying it. Neighborhood. Barbecues filled yards with smoke from hibachis that ran too hot. Dad slathered secret sauce that was mostly ketchup and pride, declaring each burger the best on the block. Kids ran between sprinklers while mothers balanced paper plates heavy with potato salad. The air was thick with laughter and charcoal. And for one evening, every fence seemed to disappear. Crowds gathered outside appliance stores just to watch the first color televisions flicker through the windows. People stood shoulder on the sidewalk, gasping as reds and blues bloomed where gray once lived. For many, it felt like witnessing the moon landing early, proof that the future was already here, glowing right behind a pane of glass. Clotheslines stretched across backyards, sheets snapping crisp in the wind. The smell of sun-warmed cotton filled the air cleaner than any detergent ever bottled. Children darted through hanging rows, laughing under the white sails like they'd stumbled into a secret fort. The sight of a line full of laundry swaying in rhythm was less a chore, or a hymn to ordinary life. The big game meant a television propped by shims, every uncle claiming to know the score before the announcer said it. Arguments over plays filled the room. None settled until maybe the replay, if it even came. Cigarette smoke hung thick, potato chips crunched loud, and for a few hours, that living room became a stadium filled with passion bigger than the screen. Ease, H. Green stamps filled books, one sticky square at a time. Mother saved them like treasure, tucking fat envelopes in drawers. Saturdays meant a trip to the redemption center, where rows of shiny appliances and toys glittered beneath fluorescent lights. Kids dreamed over bicycles or radios, but sometimes it was just a toaster. Still carrying it home, you felt like you'd struck gold. When the TV went fuzzy, a repairman showed up like a surgeon. Lugging a tube caddy full of glowing glass, he'd pop the back off, swap one out, and suddenly the picture steadied. The vertical hold knob no longer rolled the screen, and the family sighed in relief. That man in a gray cap with his box of tubes was as important as the doctor. The NBC Peacock spread its feathers, promising, brought to you in living color. Trouble was, most homes still had stubborn black and white sets. Kids craned their necks anyway, trying to imagine the colors flickering just beyond reach. By the time you saw your first real color broadcast, it felt like watching life itself through a brand new pair of eyes. The family Chevy had bench seats wide as a sofa, chrome trim that gleamed dull, and vent windows that whistled whenever you hit 50. Kids sprawled on the back shelf under the rear glass. Dogs curled beside them. No seatbelts in sight. It wasn't luxury, but somehow it felt bigger than today's cars. A rolling living room, complete with space for a nap. The whole block crowded into one living room. When Walter Kankite's voice turned heavy and he slowly took off his glasses, that single gesture told you it was serious. Somebody twisted the foil-wrapped rabbit ears, and the picture steady just enough. For a moment, you could feel the entire neighborhood breathe together because television back then wasn't just background noise. It was how we knew what mattered. A pocket transistor radio tucked beneath the pillow made every night feel like a secret. The M Top 40 drifted in and out, the announcer's voice fading through summer thunder. You'd lie awake waiting for the countdown to reach number 1. Long before playlists or earbuds, that tiny box crackling in the dark felt like your own lifeline to the wider world. Private and alive just for you, morning meant the milkman's quiet clink on the porch, glass bottles lined with cardboard caps sweating in the dawn air. The cream floated thick on top unless you gave it a good shake. Mothers brought them in while the house still smelled of coffee, and kids fought over who got to peel the cap. That sound of bottles clinking is still the sound of waking up right. School film. Strips always began with a teacher fumbling the reel into place. A beep signaled the next slide, and the classroom filled with the scent of warm projects and chalk dust. Half the kids dozed, half leaned forward to catch every frame. The clicking rhythm was soothing, but it carried the weight of every little lesson. Preserved in light across a pulled-down screen, a Polaroid camera hanging from a strap meant instant magic. You snapped the shot, yanked the photo, and waved it in the air, waiting for faces to appear. The fixer smelled sharp, almost scientific as you rubbed it across the glossy surface. Family albums filled with those stiff square prints, each one a little crooked, but alive in a way that never fades. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, whispers ran over party lines, neighbors lifting the receiver and quietly listening. The world felt close to ending, yet daily life rolled on. Kids pedaled bikes, mothers hung laundry, fathers read the paper twice. Fear hummed under the ordinary, a steady reminder that history could change in a flash, even in the most familiar kitchen. The barbershop smelled of talc, aftershave, and old wood. He knew your father's part line, your grandfather's war stories, and every little league score by heart. Kids squirmed in the chair while men argued about the game under a calendar that hadn't been flipped in months. A haircut wasn't just a trim. It was community clipped and brushed into every sentence. Family nights meant everyone. Sitting cross-legged on a braided oval rug, the Kodak carousel clicking softly in the dark. Slide after slide of vacation smiles flashed across the wall, half the room groaning at repeats, half laughing at Dad's commentary. The smell of popcorn mixed with dust from the projector, and you felt the warmth of being in the story together. At the A&W, the frosted mug hit the tray with a satisfying clink, foam running over the sides. A car hop and roller skates balanced cheeseburgers and fries like a magician, skating off before you could even thank her. The car filled with the smell of onions at the sound of bubbling root beer. Summer condensed into one perfect sip. Before sunrise, the paperboy canvas bag swung low, stuffed with folded newspapers that thudded onto porches. By breakfast, your fingers were black with ink from skimming the headlines. He rode on a rattling bike, tossing with one hand and gripping the handlebars with the other. It was steady work, and it kept a neighborhood connected. House by house, day by day, crossing guards wore bright orange belts and carried stop signs with the authority of generals. A single raised palm stopped traffic cold, and kids trotted across the street without a second thought. They weren't just guards. They were fixtures, greeting you by name, making sure you got home safe. For a moment each day, the whole town moved at kid speed. Phone numbers weren't just digits. They began with names. Regent, Melrose, Klondike. They sounded like secret codes, whispered like magic words. Children repeated them like chants until they sank in. A phone call wasn't something you tapped. It was something you dialed. The wheels spinning back with a soft whir each letter and number, unlocking a voice that waited on the other end. Airmail envelopes carried the world on their edges. Striped red, white, and blue. Inside, onion skin letters folded neat. Words scrolled in careful ink. Foreign stamps with exotic faces and birds ended up in cigar boxes saved like treasures. Each envelope felt like it had flown across oceans, carrying not just a message, but proof that someone far away thought of you. Bowling alley smelled of waxed lanes. Cigarette haze hanging thick above the neon scoreboards. Men carried polished balls in zippered leather cases, setting them down like sacred tools. Beatles songs crackled through tiny loudspeakers, and every strike sent a cheer across the smoke. Families, friends, and leagues gathered there weekly with rented shoes squeaking and nachos cooling on the plastic trays. A chemistry set felt like real science. Glass beers clinking together, and alcohol burners hissing alive. Instructions gave only the basics, assuming you'd figure the rest out without blowing up the basement window. The sharp smell of chemicals clung to your hands. Decals on the box showed a boy in goggles, and curiosity burned hotter than any match could ever manage. Late-night shock theater brought rubber-suited monsters and Beov. Screams that rattled the popcorn bowls on the couch. The host cracked corny jokes between reels. Kids tried to stay awake with flashlights, and parents chuckled from the kitchen doorway. The special effects were laughable even then, but in the dark with the house creaking, those shadows made hearts race just the same. Drive-through banks felt like the future. You slipped your deposit into a plastic cylinder, popped it into a pneumatic tube, and whoosh. It vanished into the building like a magic trick. Seconds later, the cylinder shot back with your receipt, warm from the teller's hand. Kids in the back seat begged to push the button because nothing felt more powerful than that whoosh. Souvenirs from the worlds. Fare lingered on coffee tables and shelves long after the crowds were gone. Ashed trays shaped like towers, dishes stamped with rockets, and glasses painted in bright colors nobody used. They weren't for smoking or drinking, just for remembering. Families kept them for decades. Little reminders of a time when the future seemed to sit right in your palm. Mailboxes bulged with glossy offers from record clubs promising 12 albums for a penny. Kids circled favorites with shaky pins, dreaming of stacks of vinyl arriving at the door. The deals felt too good to be true. But somehow the packages showed up. Cardboard smelling of ink and plastic. Music-filled bedrooms bought with a coin and a little hope in garages. Wooden flats of Coca-Cola bottles stacked neatly against the wall, ready for picnics and church socials. The glass sweated cold before the caps even popped. And nobody ever stopped at just one. Carried 2 backyards and clinking 6-packs. They were poured into paper cups or tipped straight back. Coke wasn't just a drink. It was a sound, a fizz, a summer. Garage radios with chrome dials hummed while ball games played over the whir of drills and saws. Static squealed every time the drill bit hit metal. But the announcer's voice powered through, calling the crack of bats and roar of crowds. The smell of motor oil and sawdust mixed with the sound of baseball, turning a garage into a workshop and a stadium at once. Mailboxes once carried trust as much as letters. You raised the little red flag by hand, slipped a stamped envelope inside, and closed the door with a click. There was never doubt it would reach the right place. The walk back up the driveway felt final, as though the message had already traveled across town just by lifting that flag. Penny candy jars stood tall on 5 and dime counters filled with licorice whips, jawbreakers and caramels wrapped in wax paper. A clerk with metal tongs never rushed the choosing, even as kids counted out nickels with sweaty palms. The sound of the jar lid lifting, the weight of candy dropped into a paper sack. That was wealth measured in sugar, not bills. Libraries carried a hush deep enough to hear your own thoughts. The wooden card catalog stretched long, drawers clacking softly as you flipped cards in neat rows. Each slip of paper carried a promise, and the librarian often knew your taste better than you did. Walking out with an armful of books felt like leaving with secret treasure, heavy with stories. Campfires lit, summer nights, sparks floating high as nylon tents lined the edge of the clearing. Someone strummed a guitar. Others sang half off key, but it didn't matter. Bacon popped in the pan at dawn, and the scout handbook's corners wore down like river stones. Lessons of knots and trails stuck longer than most school lectures. Carved into memory beside the fire, appliance store windows once blazed with Batman's theme blaring across 20 screens, each ghosted by static no salesman could fix. Men twisted rabbit ear loops desperately. Kids pressed their noses to the glass, and the color seemed brighter than reality. Even with the lines and flickers, it felt like stepping into the future. Whole family stopped just to watch it happen. High school auto shops smelled of oil and exhaust with engine blocks hanging heavy from chains on hoists. Teachers could listen to a knock and call the cylinder by ear, a trick that felt like sorcery. Kids learned by getting dirty. Grease in every pore, cuts across knuckles. But left knowing how to strip a carburetor before they could balance a checkbook. Bathrooms doubled as drying racks. Nylon stockings dripping like jellyfish over the tub. Hairspray fog hung so thick on some mornings, you could write your name in the mist with a fingertip. Grooming wasn't just routine. It was a ritual, clouding mirrors and choking the air. But the results strutted out the door, polished, stiff, and perfectly in place in the 1960s. Nights ended with someone switching off the porch light by hand. Shadows stretched quietly across the yard as the house gave a few soft creaks. In the distance, a train whistle drifted through the dark, steady and low, as if tucking the night in. It was a gentle reminder that life beyond the block kept moving, and sleep came easier with a sound like bed.